So I am going to be talking about our move from Slack to forums for community support. Just for some context, we have a small team and it's less than 10 employees. FusionAuth builds a user identity management solution, something like Okta or Auth0. And support is really important for our business model, both community support, because that's some lead gen, and it also is an important thing for, I think, any developer facing tool. And then it's also one of the offerings we have that we actually get paid for. So the way I like to think of this is that there's kind of the canonical funnel where we have the top is developers who are looking for a solution or have found your solution and want to ask questions about it. And then we have people who actually take the step of moving and using our community edition, which is free, and installing it. And then obviously some percentage of those turn into people that pay us actual money. And so we want to be able to support at a sustainable level each of these categories of users. So some of our current support systems are our documentation, which I think every developer-focused company wants to crow about the documentation, but I think ours is good. And that's obviously in searchers. If you are a user of our system and you have a bug report or a feature request, we have an open GitHub issues tracker. And then for people that are paying us money, we offer private Slack channels and at a certain level, and Zendesk support tickets, basically. So questioners are left out of that scenario. So we've tried multiple different solutions. We've tried Slack, we've tried Stack Overflow, and we're moving to forums. I'm not going to talk a ton about Stack Overflow other than to say that it's a good solution. The issue there is that you're accreting value to the Stack Overflow system as opposed to your own your own website. And so when people have questions and you answer them, and it may not be specifically about your application, it might be a database thing, and people find that later, they're going to look at Stack Overflow. They aren't necessarily going to look around your site further. So that's why we've kind of moved away from Stack Overflow, although it is a good solution. So here's what I see as kind of Slack's attributes for community support. It has a free tier, which I think is important unless you have boatloads of money and you're willing to like pay for every Slack user. Anybody who wants to sign up for community Slack, those limits are something like 10,000 messages and then a certain amount of space for files. And it's really cost prohibitive to step beyond those limits, because it's, last time I checked, it's basically $9 a user a month if you want to move past those. It's private, which I think has benefits for some kind of communities, but for developer communities, you really want answers and questions to be public. And it's timestamped, which I think is a positive attribute, because that lets you know when you're looking at an answer or a question how when it was relevant, right? Something that was relevant a year ago or 6 months ago might not be relevant today. I say it's semi-searchable because I think they've done as good a job as anybody who doesn't have the full power of the internet and PageRank and years of link mapping as Google has. I think if you compare Google Drive search to Slack search, they're comparable in my experience. So semi-searchable, it's chat, which has certain expectations around kind of responsiveness, and it's channel-based. And those, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I think they're flawed for community support. Some of the issues that we've encountered, there's a kind of a desire for immediacy, and I think that's, I think everybody asking a question wants an immediate answer. I think that the issue there is not so much immediacy for the community user, it's actually immediacy for the support staff. And I know that when I see Slack kind of pop up, or Slack message, or I get that ding, I'm very tempted to just jump right into trying to solve that problem. And that's good for community support, but as far as sustainability, that causes some issues. Another issue is that questions tend to get repeated quite often, and I think that's part of the problem with just the searchability. And then also, that's kind of just how we use chat systems, right? We're not necessarily trained to search. We're trained to like ask the questions on our mind right now. I think we've encountered limited community self-support, and I think that's fundamentally an issue with any kind of community support, right? The goal is that you have community members take steps to support other community members. We haven't seen a ton of that, and I don't think that's not intrinsic to Slack, but it is something that Slack doesn't really help with, right? There's no ways to like award badges the way that Slack Overflow has, or to make someone kind of grant them certain levels of permissions around certain channels. Slack just hasn't built that out because it's not really part of their business model. And then finally, I think that there's two kinds of channels in Slack. There are channels that are very specific that are not that busy. And then there are channels that are general that are very busy. And as a questioner, I myself have done this. I'm going to ask in the busy channel that isn't specific, which means that I'm going to, clog up the general channel and make it even busier. Now, the issue with that is that you have two places to ask these questions. As a questioner, you can ask in the slow channel where you're probably not going to get an answer because no one's really there, or you're just not going to be seen by the people who might know your answer. Or you can ask in the busy channel where, if you are lucky, you might get someone who knows your answer and can answer right then. But if you're not, it's just going to flow up in this river of text and you're not going to get an answer. So basically, if you post in the slow channel, you're not going to get an answer. If you post in the busy channel, you're not going to get an answer. So for those reasons, we moved to forums. And they have a different set of trade-offs, right? They're free-ish, right? You don't have a zero-cost solution because you have to host them somewhere. They do tend to have moderation tools. The forum software we're using is NodeBB, which is relatively modern, but it has things like the ability to kind of delete and ban a user, ability to kind of remove posts very easily, some account verification stuff. A big win for us is that it was public, and that leads it to being very searchable. And I'll kind of talk about some of the results we're seeing in terms of Google traffic, but it's timestamped and threaded. And I think the threaded aspect of it is understated in terms of question and answer sites. And what that really means to me is that you avoid that problem of the channel issue with Slack. And so you end up with a place where someone can ask a very specific question and someone else can find that question later and, answer that. Another thing that I found to be very useful around forums is that it's asynchronous, which I think takes that pressure off of support staff to constantly be monitoring the channel. You can, if you want, set up, I think you can set NodeBB to send you emails when there are new messages. Certainly I get notifications when people have posted topics, but if someone gets an answer back in 10 minutes or an hour in Slack, they're kind of like, yeah, it's a chat system. I got an answer back. Awesome. But if someone gets an answer back in an hour or a day in a forum, I think they're happy, right? And so there's just this different level of expectation around responsiveness that moving to a forum is going to allow us to have, which is going to relieve pressure on the small team. So a couple of concerns around forums. The first is spam, and the second is tumbleweeds, which is what you have probably all encountered, where you walk into a forum and the last post was from 6 months ago and the post before was from a year ago and no one's hanging out there. So to address with the spam issue, I think that the simplest thing is just to watch for it. I think it's similar to gardening, right? The best fertilizer is the footsteps of the gardener. You just have to kind of live in your forum. And in some sense, I think a forum has kind of arrived when the spammers want to actually hit it, because it means it's acquired some small level of value in terms of links. Other things you can do are require an email address, and then you can take a further step of verifying that email address. We're just requiring email address right now. We aren't actually verifying our email addresses. As far as tumbleweeds, I think the answer there is just populate it. And so I've actually taken on this task of moving over a bunch of content. So I have, I think we have about 400 posts, and about 90% of those are from me, actually like posting a message and responding to it, which feels weird, to be honest with you, but I just console myself in the fact that it provides a lot of value in terms of all those searchers, and a few of those questioners are going to be able to get the answers to their questions found, even though it looks like Dan is just talking to himself. It also lets me consolidate a couple other sources. So I've pulled data from Slack, and we're actually starting to limit access to our community Slack. We're not offering that anymore. So, but we still have a number of members there, and when they ask questions, if it's something that I feel is general purpose, I will, take it over to the forum, possibly anonymize it or tweak some of the details or expand on it. But that to me is taking a real question that a real user asked and pushing it to a place where other users can find that information. Same thing with GitHub issues. Sometimes people don't post a bug report or a feature request, they actually post a question. And so I will move that over. Other times a member of the engineering team will offer a comment that I think is worthwhile to kind of surface up. And again, this is a very manual process, but again, I think it's going to pay dividends long term. Same thing with support tickets. Again, sometimes support tickets are super in the weeds and super dedicated to a client's needs, but other times it's more of a general purpose question. And then even team conversations. There was a conversation about our roadmap the other day, and I was able to kind of extract value from it in such a way that I was able to post it on the forum, which is an informal place, and hopefully it will answer the question about roadmaps for future users. And I think that forums kind of sit on this like spectrum of Slack is super informal, and then forums are a little more formal, than blog posts, then documentation. And so the fact that it's a public place where I can kind of whip something out and maybe ask my boss to review it really quickly, but it doesn't require the same kind of level of effort to put a forum post out as it does to put a blog post out. Make sure you submit it to Google. We actually ran this issue where we set up our sitemap, but we didn't verify it actually worked and got a bunch of red marks from Google. So make sure you do that. So some quick numbers in Slack. And this will just give you kind of indication of the size of our community. We started in February 2019. Right now we have 260 members in our Slack, and we have about 5,000 public messages. I don't know the breakdown of those in terms of how many of those are actually from support staff versus from community members. Forums, we started in March 2020. We have 135 members as of last Friday, around 400 messages I mentioned. I don't know the breakdown of those, but I suspect a lot of those are from me porting things over. But the traffic is what's really interesting to me. Looking at Google Analytics, basically 2% lift in our traffic since March, and then since May, actually 3.5%. And you may say that's all Dan, just cutting and pasting stuff, right? But it's actually 65% of that is via organic Google search, which I guarantee you is not me. So people are discovering answers for themselves, and a little bit of anecdotal data is that we actually had someone come in and open a GitHub issue, a developer asking a particular kind of question, and then they were able to find an answer through additional searching on the forum. They linked that forum post and closed the issue, which honestly made me want to do a tap dance, because that's kind of the end goal, is kind of, self-supporting. And so it is early days. I'd love to give a presentation or at least an update in a year, because I don't think that it's going to continue to increase like this. But that's why we did this. That's why we did this move, right? SEO, self-supporting, and build a permanent asset for our company. And that's it. So I think I even beat time. So thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think the sharing the data just made it really sort of brought it home. I think one thing that does you both made me feel good and bad all at the same time, because I know we definitely have had a spam problem on the BuddyPress site that we've got on Flyless.dev, and I have not been doing a good enough job of that. It seems like Geordie gets all the spam. He's getting lots of fake, oh, I would like to be your friend, and you're like, I'm not sure that you really exist. But yeah, I mean, I think that's, as you say, it's sort of a mark of success when the community has enough interaction, that people come and want to and spam it. Frankly, it's sort of the cost of success. Can I ask you a question, Dan? What sort of feedback have you had from the community about the change? Like, sort of not on the data side, but just the conversations you're having, or has this been well received, or is it just, I'd be interested in that.
I mean, I don't know that they know, right? Because the people that were previously on Slack, we haven't kicked them off of Slack, and we're still answering questions there, right? And then the people that weren't on Slack never had the opportunity to go on Slack. So I have not received any kind of positive or negative feedback. But
you haven't like suggested to the Slack folks that they join the new.
We have. That's actually a good point. With one or two times, I've been like, hey, here's this thing over here. Could you post over there? And a couple of times people have been like, no, right? Or their actions have said no, right? But other people are creating accounts on the forums because there's a hunger, but I don't know whether we didn't have an auto Slack sign up process either. You had to email us, and like we would manually add you. So I don't know that we've increased the barrier that much for getting questions answered. But you're right. I think existing Slack users will continue to want to be in Slack for a long time, because there's that immediacy, right? And we've actually had internal discussions about how do we weigh that against the other priorities we have, right? And we've talked about instituting kind of a reverse SLA, where we like hold ourselves back from answering questions as fast as we possibly can. I don't know. It's a tough place, because there are times when I'm doing support where I should actually be doing writing, right? Because I have a larger goal that I need to move towards, but support is like so fun, right? It can be fun. It can be fun. I shouldn't say it's always fun. Does that answer your question? I feel like it doesn't.
It does. I mean, I think, I don't want to. I'm not telling you what to do. You're here kindly sharing information about what you're doing. But no, I just feel like you've got two communities there, and the numbers were, reasonable on the Slack forum. And so I'm just interested, especially if someone else was considering making this sort of migration and doing more, on the forum side, then, finding ways to incentivize or encourage those that had been using Slack to come over, I feel like would be an opportunity. I mean, I'm sure there is some overlap, but if you think about, you're getting better numbers, but you could very quickly kind of ramp that up, potentially.
Yeah, in my mind, and again, this is early days, right? Like it could be in 3 months or 6 months, we'll want to change things around. But in my mind, this feels like kind of the legacy SaaS plan, where you have your early SaaS users, and you're like, yeah, you're gonna keep paying whatever you signed up for your still, you can keep if you found something that works for you in our system, we're going to keep supporting you. So I would love to move everybody over to the forums. I don't know. I mean, one option, which maybe I'll start doing, is not actually answering in the Slack, right? Actually answering the forum and then just putting a link to the forum, right? And just being like, hey, here's where it is. But I haven't gotten to that point yet. I don't know. Does anyone else have any opinions? Like, would you be peeved if I did that to you and you were in a Slack channel?
I wonder whether there's a positive reinforcement way of doing it by giving people a badge. You were an early adopter or something that appears in the forum, and actually get them to kind of engage positively with the fact that they're being moved to another system. That might work better than pulling the rug, if that makes sense.
It's so funny. The whole badge thing. Like, I think, oh, kids love badges, but no, everyone loves badges.
Everyone loves badges. The reason why I put almost all my budget into stickers. Everyone loves them.
How are you distributing stickers in the Rona era where we can't get on planes? What are you doing?
We're not at the moment. It's typically something that we've used we tend to do things with physical events, and we'll produce stickers that are for that event. So for the company I work for, we will have these events typically a couple of times a year, and we'll invite developers to them, and we will have, here's a sticker that shows you came to this Miami event. Here's a sticker that showed you came to this kind of Dublin event. And people kind of collect them on their laptops and various things. And that's what we've typically done in the past. But it's ground to a halt over the last couple of months. There's nothing we can do about it. We will see in the future. I mean, we're quite positive that things are moving in the right direction, and face-to-face things will start happening again. So we think that probably, certainly for us anyway, this year is going to continue as it is. It'll be a unique year, but we're quite hopeful that 2021 will move back to face-to-face in some capacity.
Maybe you can put masks on your stickers.
Yes, these are the 2020 stickers with face masks over the front. I think that's a great idea.
Or the sticker itself can be a mask. You can kind of just like peel it off, stick it on your face. It's not so good with me with my beard though, or with James. It's gonna hurt removing it.
No, yeah, that might not be so good, but I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. So, sorry, Craig, can you remind which is your company? Can you remind us?
I work for a Finnish company called M-Files. They're an information management company. So my role is developer evangelist for them.
Cool. M-Files. Okay, good. You're here, so I'm going to ask you, do you know, are you using forums or do you use Slack? How are you supporting people? What's your sort of, especially at the moment with everything being online, what are you using?
We have a range of things at the moment, and one of the reasons I was on this call, Dan, is I really want to hear your experience with this, because we have, for example, a legacy forum system, which is spammed to death. I think there was 190,000 registrations last time I looked. Probably 99.9% of them are spam. So we have a legacy forum system. We also have Yammer networks that we use for kind of for partners who have a level of access above kind of the wider community. And we also then use things like Teams and various other kind of mechanisms. We don't use Slack. Slack's not something we've ever invested in. But at the moment, those are kind of our three. We have forums for public. We have Yammer, where we want to make it more private. And then we have Teams for the kind of the ultra private stuff. But we're having a lot of problems with both of the first two, really. Our forum system is creaking and desperately needs to be replaced. And we have lots of issues with Yammer and EU geos versus US geos. We have our Yammer based in the US, and a lot of EU-based companies now can't access it because Microsoft can't guarantee data protection between the two. And so we have a real issue with what we're going to do with this, which is why I was quite interested in what Dan was doing today.
Yeah, that's brutal. Dan, can you give some sort of what can you give us some platform specifics about what you're actually using and what
Yeah.
was your sort of evaluation sort of process and so on?
Sure, sure. So, actually, I was not involved in the evaluation process. That happened before I got on, so I can't speak to that. We're using NodeBB, and as you saw with the numbers, right? Like I do not know how NodeBB scales to 100,000 registrations, right? So I can't really speak to the scale solutions, but I was pleasantly surprised by how modern NodeBB feels, because I was used to kind of the older like PHPBB and some of those old forums that really felt creaky, and this feels more like a modern web application. So I don't have, sorry, Craig, I don't have any recommendations for you other than invest in as much spam control as you possibly can. Because, I mean, I guess one question for you actually is there value in the existing forum content, right? Like, are you seeing Google searches or people referencing it in other situations, or is it all just garbage and it's better to throw it away and start over?
Yeah, I've noticed that Wes has got a question. I don't want to kind of bog up the microphone, but yes, we have a lot of older content that is appropriate. Honestly, of those, whatever it was, 190,000 accounts, there's probably only 2,000 that post. And we are going through a process at the moment. We're trying to look at what we do with these systems, and migration of that content is something we need to do. And it's a volume of content that is sufficient that we can't do it manually. We can't, unfortunately, take the route you've taken, which is unfortunate because a lot of it is possibly outdated, but we are going to have to migrate it. Otherwise, we're going to end up with, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, with tumbleweeds in the new system, and that's going to be a real problem for us. So we don't have any answers.
What's your question, Wesley?
You mentioned that sorry for coming in late, I was on the wrong link, but you mentioned that you send people who ask questions over to the forum, not in Slack, but in other places. I was curious, do you, when you send them over, just saying check the forum first, or do you check the forum? If the answer is not there, create the location, create the answer, and then send them to that direct location where they can get that resource? Or do you try to have them recreate their question so that it's more appropriate for a wider audience to let the community try to jump in and answer it?
Right. So I'm sorry if I misspoke. I'm rarely directing people over to the forum. That was one of the things I talked about doing with Slack, but right now, I'm not doing that. So, but what I wouldn't do, honestly, we just don't have the forum community, so I wouldn't expect anyone to do that right now. Like in 6 months, then I would start to hope that we see some of that. Again, we're kind of a small company, and so we may never see that, right? It may always be people are either finding their answers or they're getting them answered by a employee. But that's the goal, is definitely community support, but we're nowhere near that right now. Does that answer your question?
It does, but it makes me ask another question. I hope that's okay. Kind of the community portion of it, what you says that you hope to build is not just be a resource, but to be a place for people to gather and to also talk to other people who gather in that location. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a knowledge source, but it also is like a town square for the people who are interested. Are you proactively doing anything to like entice people to communicate with each other, or is it really just focused as a resource to answer support questions?
That's a great question. And, that's not something I've thought deeply about. And that's where, honestly, frankly, the town square is where Slack excels, right? And so it could be that after a year of this forum stuff, I'll be like, oh my gosh, we've killed the town square aspect of this, because it's not going to live in a non-real-time environment. But frankly, I haven't seen a ton of that town square stuff even in Slack, right? There's a random channel that has, I don't know, I mean, it's been weeks since it's been posted in, right? Things like that. So it's not like, and that could be, it's not like that's happening now. And it could be that's just because of, one, the size of our audience, right? The size of our community, or two, what we are, right? Like we are a tool that you snap into existing applications. We're not like a self-contained thing. Therefore, people come in, they want to get their questions answered, and they don't want to hang out and talk about OAuth, right? Or SAML, right? Like, and I understand that. And so they just want to come in, do their thing, and then get out. And so they're not hanging out as much, would be my gut feel, but I haven't thought about that deeply.
Thank you.
Sorry, Wesley, you go.
No, I just said thank you. That's all.
I was going to ask Dan. Do you see? I mean, from the kind of title of the presentation and what you started with, I think you do. But do you see the forums actually replacing Slack over time? Is that what you're trying to do? Because I suppose the gut feeling I have is that the two are perhaps complementary. You know, Slack, you alluded to it. Slack is very much ask a question, get an answer, ask a question, get an answer. Whereas a forum is more of a long-lasting thing. So it doesn't necessarily require that back and forth. And I don't know, you know, are you looking to replace the Slack with a forum? And do you feel that you might lose some element of community by doing so, by not having that kind of to and fro with people?
Sure. So I would say, and this is just my personal opinion, like we're flexible. We're seeing how the forums work out. I think long-term for our use case of supporting the questioners of, you know, people who want to ask questions, forums are just better for that than Slack. Better for the end user. They're better for the, for our team. I think that we will still continue to use some kind of real-time solution. Like you said, your Yammer option, we offer that to our clients in Slack for people that are buyers that are paying us money. I don't, you know, I would love to get to the point where we're big enough that we can have like a user group community. And I think at that point, Slack suddenly starts to make sense, right? If you're having people who want to get together and talk about Fusion Auth, about like, you know, the different ways that they are integrating with various IDPs and yada, 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 then I think there's a community there that is going to benefit from talking to each other. I just don't know that we're at that size right now. And so if you have to choose between the two things, the community or the getting people's questions answered, I think we're leaning more towards that latter right now. Looks like Eddie had a comment, and then Rinal. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. What's do you want to ask a question or?
I just had a comment. And so we moved recently from Slack to GitHub discussions, and and we're pretty small around an open source project, a pretty small community. And during the course of building up like the first 100 people, I was personally interacting with everyone who joined our Slack channel, right? And it was like a personal, hey, what do you do? Why are you interested in us? And what I've noticed is at around 120 people, we decided we want to move over to GitHub discussions because it's closer to our open source project. Content accumulates and a lot of the points you made. But we've lost over the last month of that transition, we've lost that personal interaction with all the new people coming in, right? And we have actively like discouraged discussion on Slack. So I agree with Craig's point about like losing that personal touch, not only within the community, but like even from us as we're building a community, which I think has accruing effects that we haven't quite realized yet.
And are you changing your behaviors based on that realization, or is it more just like, hey, let's see how this plays out?
At the moment, it's, hey, let's see how it plays out. Because what we were realizing was that it takes a lot of effort to get people to gather in one place, and getting them to gather in two places is double the effort. And so at the moment we're just saying, hey, let's see how this plays out, and maybe we'll try out other things in the future.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting, the tension between getting people's questions answered in a way that is sustainable and like scalable, and building community, right? And those are two different goals, and they're intertwined. But I think that maybe trying to use the same tool for two different goals, or I don't know, it's or anyway, yeah, that's an interesting perspective for sure.
I want to speak to the emotional labor that I think comes with moderating a forum. And I wonder what everyone's experience is with that, because like Dan, you mentioned in your presentation that Slack, you know, the expectation is there that the response is going to be immediate. Whereas a forum, you know, it feels good to get a response an hour or a day later. And I do agree. I moderate 2 different Slacks, and it is emotional labor, but forum is that way too. So I'm just wondering if anyone has any thoughts around that.
One thing I would say, and I think this is interesting, a friend of mine, Alexis Richardson, who kind of built RabbitMQ as a thing, that had originally been something that the company he worked at, L-Shift, was doing. And then when they built the community, they made that it was like yeah, like any question will be answered within a specific amount of time. And he feels like a lot of the strength of the RabbitMQ community came back to that original commitment to rapid response. So I think that's an interesting one vis-a-vis what people's expectations are. And some people's expectations are crazy. I mean, sorry, crazy is not a great word to use. I mean, some people's expectations are unrealistic. You know, you're using some open source component that is developed by one person, and then they don't answer your question within, 2 hours, and you start saying that they are a bad person. Unfortunately, yeah, there are a lot of people that have really high expectations. Funnily enough, they're also the people that will never pay for your product or project. That's a singleton, same community. But yeah, I think that yeah, expectations are high, and that's a really good question, Katie. I don't know if anyone else has any insights about that. Hey, Wesley, would love to hear from you.
So this is less of experience directly, but experience in terms of receiving that I've seen some brands do, is to try to really humanize the people who support the community, so that people's expectation can be a little bit more in line with the bandwidth of a person. And so what they did, this is over Twitter and not on Slack, but kind of similar in terms of expectations of immediate response once a question is posed. What they did is they had the people who are doing support actually like introduce themselves, like, hey, I'm just now starting, catching up on old messages, working through the backlog. And then like you could see, then it set expectations of like, okay, and then at the end of the day, they said, okay, signing off for the day, see you tomorrow. And it was more of a, just like really like a transparent personal approach to it, because it was a person, and it allowed people to be a little bit more forgiving when they didn't get a response, or like have other people participate who did not see that beginning message, but other people did. And so they would chime in like a community and saying, oh, well, she said that she's working on backlog, so it could take a bit before you get an answer, but you could also check this. And so the community was able to jump in and see where help was needed and actually work, because the person was really transparent about how they were approaching the task and what load that they were dealing with, even their mood. So they were saying, having a great day, or it seems like we got in this spike, so they were actually not only just talking about their availability, but the general issues. They would broadcast like wide-scale issues. Like I'm seeing a lot of people complaining about downtime or long responses, and that would also like help preempt some of the questions too. So they're really active with like trying to not just answering one-on-one, but kind of set the tone and then set like an overarching expectation every single day?
Yeah, that sounds like a really good sort of best practice. I mean, being observable is always helpful. Sometimes this stuff, just about how you feel, is really useful metadata for people to understand what's going on. But it always puts me in mind of something really interesting that the London Underground did a few years back that I'm not sure people fully understood, but it changed the relationship with Transport for London in lots of ways. Well, there are a couple of things I think that are really interesting. One is what they used to do was they would report if one of the lines was bad. So, you know, you'd arrive and it'd be like, oh, we're afraid the central line is having problems today. And you'd immediately be thinking how bad everything was. You know, oh, there's a problem on the underground again. But what they started doing was reporting on all of the lines. And so like everything is good. And if you just see one red line and a bunch of green lines, then you're like, oh, well, that's just one problem in the network. But they just got much better at reporting their successes. And so the way you felt about that, I think, was quite different. And then Wesley, I think another thing to a point that they also do, I don't know if you've ever seen them, they sometimes get trend on Twitter or something. They have boards that are handwritten, and it'll just be something about how the employees are feeling, or perhaps it's when, you know, particularly when London's had issues, the city our size, you know, there are going to be times when everybody is stressed. So just writing down that personalized message of, you know, we're here for you, I think it can really change just how people feel about the service. And so, yeah, so Dan, love it, being observable. I mean, that's John Udell, you know, old school idea of how to comport yourself online. And I super think it's valuable.
I think both of those points change the conversation from this being almost a service-driven thing. I'm going to write a request, I expect a response. I'm going to write a request, I expect a response. It moves it away from being a service-driven thing towards something which is community. It actually engenders that community feel as opposed to something which is more functional, should we say.
When Wesley was talking, I was thinking like you know, how do you treat your bank clerk? When you walk up to your bank clerk, you can see if they're stressed, you can see if they're talking to someone else, like, and we don't have any of that nonverbal context online, right? So what Wesley was saying was like, hey, here's ways that I've seen people provide that. And I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense to like he said, humanize it, right? It was really great.
And I think especially at the moment, you know, this is something, I mean, I guess to you know, the Flyless, you know, the Rona era, I think especially at the moment, we are all very aware of that it is a difficult time. Hopefully people are making more allowances for other people, because everybody is carrying some load, some cognitive overhead. You know, I don't think anyone is finding the current time easy. Or I don't know, actually, there was a poll yesterday, it was like happiness in the USA. And although there were two lines trending downwards, there was one where people very happy increasing. And I was like, who are these people in the United States that are like very happy at the moment? I can understand being mildly optimistic or not dead yet, but very happy was surprising to me. But I guess, you know, yep, some people like chaos. But anyway, I do think that the humanization is something that we're all somewhat here for. You know, it goes back to what I was saying. One of the great stories for me of this last few months was the GitHub keynote when Alison McMillan gave this talk about code spaces and GitHub repo integration, where, you know, it was just all about productivity. But then the way she articulated it was, you know, when I get the chance and I put the kids down for a nap, I just want to be coding. I don't want to be doing all the rest of the environments and stuff. And I think that's what we're all feeling at the moment, that, you know, productivity is something you snatch, not something that is all the time. So I'm sort of hopeful that we might come out of this with a bit more care for the way other people are feeling. But I am a hopeless optimistic. So yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, I think, you know, if you think back to that classic BBC clip where the guy, you know, he gets his kids come in and then the nanny runs in, and, you know, everyone watched that and everyone laughed, and, you know, everyone's going, oh, you know, it's just atrocious, and, you know, professionalism, all this sort of stuff. But realistically, that's happened to almost everybody now. You know, we've all been on these calls and we've all had something happen in the background. And you know what? That's life. And I as James, I really hope that we come out of this with a bit more compassion for people. And, you know, regardless of whether you're on a Zoom call or whether that person is at the other end of a forum answering questions. Sorry, you're right. It was his wife, not his nanny. That was, yes. But it was reported, I think, as his nanny to start with. It was his wife.
Both are true statements. Both are true statements. I think we're okay. And thanks for the clarification, Eddie. But yeah, I think it was originally reported as that. So on that note, so I'm now at a stage in my life where well, I'll tell you a story. So it was last Sunday. I'd been working out and I went and had a shower, and then I realized I didn't have any shower gel. My son's the room where my son works and his computer is right next to the shower room. So I started shouting, "Farrell!" You know, at first I was like, "Farrell," because it was just through one more, "Farrell." I keep calling him. And then I got louder and louder. And then my daughter came and was like, "Dad, are you know, oh no, yeah, could you get the shower gel?" So she did that. And then a few minutes later, or maybe half an hour later, even my son came and he knocked. Oh, so it must have just been a few minutes later because I was still there. Knocked on the door. He said, "Are you all right, Dad?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." He's like, "Well, because that was my drama group and I was in the middle of a monologue." So yeah, it's not just our kids that are doing it to us. I became that guy. It's just, so he's like trying to do a dramatic monologue with his online drama group,
and
yeah.
you're being the dramatic one in the background.
I was, yeah, Farrell.
At least you didn't run in kind of half naked going, "Where's the shower?"
Well, yeah, no, I've become more aware of that as a thing. That it's probably not a good idea to run into the room unexpectedly and half-dressedly. So yeah, we're all learning. And Katie, yeah, I mean, hopefully, yeah, compassion can and will be a silver lining outcome. And you know, it's partly up us to set the tone, right? You know, sort of DevRel is an activity that touches a lot of people. You know, I think it's both the good and the bad of DevRel, that people in DevRel and developer advocacy tend to be quite empathetic people. But yeah, you know, I hopefully, I know that some people will immediately just go back to being, in fact, they're already there, right? I mean, they're already, "No, I'm not going to wear a mask," and all of that sort of stuff. But in the scope of control that we have, yeah, a little bit of compassion goes a long way.
I think the community can really surprise us sometimes, in that I remember once I promised to do a live stream on a topic and something happened and I was just exhausted. I didn't want to do it, but I thought, you know what, I promised, and I cancelled it once before. This was just in my YouTube channel, so it wasn't with another community. And I remember doing it, and I gave an intro to the topic and a bit of an overview, and did about 30 minutes. It's going to be about 2-hour kind of Q&A with the community. And after 30 minutes, everyone said, "Look, you look like your mind and your heart isn't in it today. You obviously got something on your mind. let's just do it another time. And I was just really taken back at how many comments in the chat, people just like, seriously, thanks for showing up, but we can see you're not your usual self.
Mhm.
Just, call it a day. And that really kind of meant a lot. And that meant next time I wanted to do, so much more and so forth. And yes, you get that one person who's an idiot. He goes, no, I came here. You cancelled it last time. It's like, and someone wrote something that made me laugh so much was ask Eddie for a refund because they haven't paid anything. It's just an open a
Right,
YouTube live stream.
exactly.
So ask for a refund. And the community really stood up for me. And I got those messages afterwards, and I was really touched and really impressed. And it just, I thought it was great. And maybe it is because of the current challenging times, people are realizing that it isn't as it used to be, I suppose. So I'm not sure, but yeah, the community can be awesome.
Yeah, for sure.